I still remember so clearly the first time I met Mr. Henry, 67 years old, a retired male truck driver from Chicago. He was a cheerful man, spoke clearly, with a deep but warm voice, the kind of person everyone liked instantly. But that day, sitting in front of me, he wasn't smiling like usual. His voice was hoarse. His lips trembled. And he struggled to get out each word. But they came out broken. His wife was the one who brought him to the hospital. She spoke in a shaky voice. This morning, he was trying to call the dentist to book an appointment. But right in the middle of the call, his voice just disappeared. His mouth was moving, but no sound came out. At that moment, I felt uneasy. Because when someone who's otherwise healthy, no diabetes, no high blood pressure, suddenly loses their ability to speak, it's a serious sign. We ordered an emergency brain MRI. The result: Mr. Henry had just suffered a stroke in the language center of his left brain. But what shook me more wasn't just the stroke that day. It was something that had happened 2 weeks earlier, something he thought didn't matter. He told me, "I remember one day I was driving to the grocery store. Hands on the wheel, and my left hand suddenly felt a little numb. Like pins and needles, a bit of a tingle, then it passed. I thought maybe it was just from driving too long. And another time, I was on the phone with my grandkid. Suddenly, my words started to come out wrong. My mouth was still moving, but the words stumbled. I figured maybe I was tired or hadn't slept well. No pain. No fall. No memory loss. Each episode only lasted a few seconds. And then it was gone." He brushed it off. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't get checked out. I didn't think it was a problem. Who would have thought? Dear friend, a fleeting numbness in your hand might seem like nothing but strain. A moment of stumbling over words might feel like fatigue. But to your brain, it might be the only warning it ever gives before your memory, your voice, or your ability to communicate disappears. And what breaks my heart even more, is how many people only recognize that warning after it's too late. Have you ever felt a slight numbness in one arm and brushed it off? Have you ever tried to say something and your mouth didn't cooperate and laughed it off? If so, you may have already heard that first alarm bell. The real question is, will you act now or wait until it becomes a call for emergency help? In the next part, I'll help you understand exactly what a mini stroke is, a transient ischemic attack, why it doesn't hurt, but why it's still incredibly dangerous if ignored. We'll shine a light together on those tiny moments, the kind that can change the course of an entire life of clarity. Are you ready to hear what your brain's been trying to tell you? Many people still believe, "I'll only worry when it's a real stroke." These little things, numb fingers, slurred speech, brief dizziness, they are probably nothing. But the truth is, your brain always gives early warning signs, and even the smallest symptoms, if unusual, may be the very first signal that a stroke is on its way. We call this stroke risk warning, the early signs of stroke risk. It won't knock you down right away. It won't make you forget who you are in an instant. But it's like a light tap on the shoulders. Oh, gentle, you'll miss it unless you choose to turn around and pay attention. Imagine your brain as a vast garden, nourished by hundreds of tiny water streams. Each stream is a blood vessel carrying oxygen to memory, language, balance, and emotions. When one or several of those streams slow down or get temporarily disrupted, your body sends you a gentle message. A slight tingling in your hand, a brief blur in your vision, a few stumbles in your speech, a heavy head that's not quite a headache, remembering something, then losing it in a flash is the first sign of stroke risk. Unlike a full stroke where a blood vessel bursts or is completely blocked, a stroke risk warning is your brain fighting to adapt to small, hidden changes in your blood flow. Fluctuating blood pressure, unstable blood vessel contractions, thickened blood from dehydration, mismatched medication, or improper supplements. ongoing stress that you keep telling yourself you're handling just fine, and if you don't listen, those small taps will eventually turn into a much louder hit when your words no longer form clearly, your hand no longer lifts the way you want, and your memory forgets the very people you love. The important thing isn't whether the stroke has happened yet. What matters most is, will you notice the early signs in time to stop it? Many people have felt these signs already. Sadly, they just didn't think it was worth paying attention to. And here's what worries me the most: warnings from the brain don't knock loudly. They whisper through one stumble in speech, one morning of blurred vision, one moment when your hand drops a little too easily. If you hear a tie, you still have time. If you ignore it, time may not come around again. In the next part, I'll walk you through two of the most important signs that older adults often overlook. One in your hand, one in your voice, that are actually two of the brain's most urgent signals warning that your stroke risk is rising. And you may be surprised to realize, I think I've felt that before, but I never gave it a second thought. If there's one thing I hope every older adult remembers after a visit with me, it's these two warning signs. They're not dramatic. They're not immediately dangerous. But they are the brain's first whisper that something in your blood flow is beginning to go off track. Unfortunately, most people only recognize them when it's too late. I don't want that to be you. 1. Sudden numbness or a light drop in one hand while holding something. The feeling is often very brief. You're holding a cup, and suddenly your grip weakens, like it's slipping. You're brushing your teeth, and your wrist doesn't follow through, the brush shifts awkwardly. Or you're eating, and your hand pauses midair, numb for a few seconds, then back to normal. Most people assume poor circulation, arm fatigue. Maybe I held it wrong. What they don't know is, the part of the brain responsible for movement may be experiencing a brief lack of blood flow. And if it's your non-dominant hand, you're even more likely to dismiss it. What we see in practice, many patients who later suffered a stroke in the motor region of the brain recalled having a brief numbness or hand weakness days earlier. But since there was no pain, no one thought to see a doctor. 2. Sudden loss of speech, or mixing up words mid-sentence. One patient told me, I was trying to say to my son, I'm cooking soup, but my mouth said, I'm cooking soup, saying. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't correct it in the moment. Others start a sentence but suddenly freeze, like the words vanish from their mind. These are not signs of simple aging confusion. This is a temporary breakdown in your brain's language center, often triggered by interrupted blood flow to the frontal or temporal lobe. Why is this dangerous? Because this is the same region that controls naming, sentence formation, and speech memory. If it becomes permanently damaged, it can take away your ability to form full sentences for life. If either of these two signs happens once, you might overlook it. But if it happens again, even briefly, you must get checked. Because those tiny glitches in the brain are often the first places that suffer permanent damage during a true stroke. Maybe you brushed it off before, but now, you know. And that knowledge could save everything. There are things in life we simply can't afford to wait and see about. Like hearing a strange noise in your car's engine, you don't wait for the car to die before checking it. Your brain, far more precious, deserves to be heard from the very first sound of warning. If you've experienced either of these signs before, don't brush it aside again. It could be the only chance you'll have to protect your voice, your memory, and your independence. I once asked a 72-year-old gentleman after he recovered from a mild stroke, did you ever feel numbness in your hand, or notice your speech slowing down before it happened? He scratched his head and gave a soft laugh. Yeah. I think so. But I figured it was probably from sleeping wrong or just getting older. That answer didn't surprise me. In fact, I've heard it many times. From kind, thoughtful, even very careful people who still missed the early warnings coming from their own body. Why does this happen so often? 1. Because the signs are too brief and too light to cause concern. A hand that feels numb for just a few seconds. A word said wrong, then corrected. A moment of dizziness that passed after a short rest. When something doesn't hurt, doesn't knock you down, doesn't scare anyone, it's easy to dismiss it as just a little glitch. Your brain is knocking on the door. But you're in the middle of cooking, making a call, watching the grandkids. And that knock fades like tapping on a pillow. 2. Because we've learned to tough it out instead of asking questions. I've noticed something: older adults are incredibly good at pushing through. They go to the store with a headache. They cook for the family even with aching legs. They say, "It's nothing," even when they feel off. That kind of strength can be admirable. But being strong in the wrong moment can come at the cost of your memory, your words, or your clarity. There are things we should never tough out. A numb hand. A stuttered word. These are not small things. They are early warnings. 3. Because they don't want to bother anyone, or be seen as just getting old and fussy. I once had an elderly woman whisper to me during a clinic visit, "I didn't tell my children. I didn't want to worry them. It was just a little slip while I was talking. I'm old, you know." Older adults often humble themselves. They don't want to be a burden. They worry about being too sensitive. And so, they stay silent. But dear friend, your brain doesn't care how old you are. It only knows when the blood isn't flowing right. Whether you're 40 or 70, it will speak up. And your job is to listen. Not apologize for noticing something that feels different. Maybe you've told yourself, "I'm sure it's nothing." Or maybe you've brushed it off with a smile, "Must be from not sleeping well last night." But if deep down you've ever thought, "Why am I slipping on words more lately? Why does my left hand feel weaker than usual?" That's not random. That's your memory. That's your voice. That's your clarity asking for just a bit more of your attention. And that small moment of attention might just preserve your independence for years to come. Someone once asked me, "But what if I already missed the first sign? What do I do now?" And I said, "If you don't miss the next one, you've already changed the whole journey. You may have let one chance pass without knowing. But the next one might be happening right now, and your decision to say, 'I'll go get checked. I'll talk to someone I trust.' One moment of awareness. For a lifetime of clarity." And if you're thinking, "So what do I actually do after I notice a sign like that?" The next part is for you: gentle, clear, and just enough to help you take action today, without fear. I've seen far too many people arrive at the emergency room unable to say a full sentence. Not because they were weak. Not because they were careless. Just because they were a few days slower than their brain's warning signal. And when I asked their family members, "Did you notice anything strange a few days ago?" the answer was almost always, "Yes, but it seemed minor. So we didn't think it was serious." Dear friend, there are some things you don't need to wait until they get bad to take action. When it comes to your brain, even a 1-second delay could mean a whole memory is erased. A word you never got to say. A face you didn't quite recognize in time. A song you once knew by heart suddenly sounding unfamiliar the next day. I feel such sorrow for the many people who missed these moments. Because truly, all of them could have been saved with just one phone call. One early checkup. So what should you do if you notice a light symptom? You don't need to panic. You don't need to rush to a big hospital. All you need is, call your primary doctor or a trusted nurse, clearly describe your symptom. "I felt slight numbness in my hand. I mixed up a few words." Note, when did it happen? What were you doing? How long did it last? Don't say, "It's probably nothing." That may be the most costly sentence of your life if you're wrong. Get checked within 24 to 72 hours after the sign appears. Ask about brain blood flow scans, or carotid artery checks. Request an early stroke risk assessment. If you already take medications, bring them with you so the doctor can review your dosage. The golden window to prevent a stroke doesn't start when you pass out. It starts right after the first sign, when your brain is just beginning to knock. Don't add brain boosters or fish oil on your own without asking a doctor. Many patients try to help themselves by increasing ginkgo, fish oil, vitamin B, thinking it'll help circulation, but if your blood vessels are already unstable, this might do more harm than good. Taking the wrong supplement at the wrong time is like pouring more water into a leaking pipe. Your brain needs stable flow, not more or less. Just right. One phone call can pull you back from the edge. One early doctor visit can preserve your ability to speak, write, remember, understand, live independently, not because you're weak but because you're wise enough to realize your brain just sent a signal. Just like when you see a spark in a wire, you don't wait for a fire to fix it. Your brain, the brightest light of your entire life, deserves to be heard even when it's just flickering. Someone once asked me, if I missed the first warning sign, is it too late to protect what's left? And I said, it's not too late. You still have time if you begin today. Call your doctor if you notice something unusual. Talk to your family if something feels off but you can't quite explain it. Let someone help you while everything is still within reach. There was one woman who did exactly that, and because she acted early, she still remembers her granddaughter's name 2 years later. Would you like me to tell you her quiet, hopeful story next? I want to share with you a story I'll never forget. It's about Margaret, 71 years old, living alone in a quiet suburb of Seattle. A gentle woman who loved reading and wrote in her journal every early morning. She used to be a literature teacher. For her, language wasn't just a tool. It was her pride, her intellect, her identity. One March morning, as she was journaling like always, she suddenly noticed her right hand veering off on the page. No tremor, no pain, just the pen not moving the way she intended. And when she tried to read the line aloud, she realized, why can't I pronounce this word clearly? I meant to say peaceful but I said peef. Peen. Something like that. It lasted less than a minute. Then everything went back to normal. No dizziness, no weakness. She sipped some water, stood up and took a breath. And she might have brushed it off entirely. But one small thing changed everything. She remembered something I had said in a video once: if something happens to you that has never happened before, even just once, take it seriously. The brain never sends a false signal. And that one sentence made her stop. She didn't ignore it. She didn't assume. She picked up the phone and called her daughter. Within 2 hours, she was at the hospital. The MRI scan showed a brief ischemic episode in the Broca area, the brain's language center. Fortunately, no permanent damage yet. The cause: fluctuating nighttime blood pressure and high-dose fish oil taken after dinner. We adjusted her medications, paused her supplements, and gave her steps to monitor her blood pressure and heart rate during sleep. After just 3 weeks, she told me her head felt lighter, her writing flowed again, and she no longer stumbled on words while chatting with her grandkids over Zoom. A month later, I received an email from her. Attached was a handwritten page from her morning journal. I don't know what exactly happened inside my brain that day. But I do know this. If I had stayed silent, I might not be able to write this today. So you see, Margaret didn't do anything extraordinary. She simply paused, noticed something different in herself, and chose to trust it. And in that moment, she saved her voice, her words, her memory, and the writing ritual she's kept every morning for over 40 years. What about you? If tomorrow, your hand feels off or your mouth trips over a word, will you brush it off, or will you do what Margaret did? You don't need to be a genius. You don't need a doctor right beside you. You just need the courage to pay attention, to make a call, to ask a question. Because protecting your voice doesn't require talent, only the decision not to dismiss it. I often tell my older patients, you don't need to be a doctor to know when your body is changing. If you simply pay attention at the right time, you're already one step ahead of a stroke. The early signs of a stroke rarely scream. They don't slam the door. They don't knock you to the ground. They whisper like a light tingling, a single word slipping away, a foggy morning you can't explain. And to help you catch those whispers before they fade, I invite you to take just 2 minutes each month to ask yourself 3 simple questions. You can write them down, jot them in a journal, or simply sit quietly and answer them in your heart. Question 1. Have I felt tingling or numbness on one side of my body without a clear reason, even just for a few minutes? Examples. You're holding your phone, and it slips from your hand. A prickling or pins and needles sensation runs up your left arm or right leg. You glance in the mirror and notice your smile looks uneven, but then it goes back to normal. Pushpin emoji. If yes, this could be a sign of temporary blood flow disruption to one side of the brain. Ask yourself, how long did it last? What were you doing? Has it happened more than once? If it's occurred more than twice in a month, please speak to your doctor about a brain circulation check. Question 2. Have I said the wrong word, stumbled over speech, or struggled to find a word I meant to say? Examples. You mean to say phone, but table comes out instead. You forget the name of someone close to you mid-sentence. Your mouth moves just fine, but the words don't come. Pushpin emoji. This is a classic sign of temporary disruption to the brain's language center. If it's happened once while tired, it may not be serious. But if it's happening more frequently or your family notices, please get checked. Question 3. Have I felt my mind go blank or lost orientation briefly, especially in the morning? Examples. You get out of bed and feel a heaviness in your head. Not quite dizzy, just foggy. You're in the kitchen, but forget why you came in. It feels like your thoughts just drop into silence for a few seconds. This may signal early blood flow issues to the frontal lobe, the part of your brain responsible for awareness, direction, and short-term memory. If this feeling comes alongside speech issues or numbness even once, it's time for a full checkup. You don't need to wait for a stroke to care for your brain. You just need to do this once a month or anytime you feel something is not quite right. And if you've answered yes to at least 2 of these 3 questions, please don't keep it to yourself. Talk to someone you love. Talk to your doctor. Don't carry in silence something that could protect your memory, your voice, your future. You've already done something powerful just by asking yourself these questions. And if you're quietly wondering, if I make a change today, how might that shape my future? Then let me share one last thought with you, something soft, but full of strength. Losing your voice often begins in silence. But keeping it can start with just one moment of choosing to pause. Dear friend, we always take care of others. We wake up early to cook, remember our grandkids' birthdays, worry about our spouse's back pain, keep track of their medications. But sometimes, we forget to listen to ourselves. We feel a tingling hand and brush it off. We stumble over a word and laugh it away. We feel our mind go quiet for a moment and blame it on age. And I understand that. Because older adults, especially the kindest ones, often put themselves last. But here's the truth. Your brain won't wait until you're done caring for everyone else before it starts calling for help. It sends signals when it needs you the most. And if you don't pause to care for yourself, there may come a day when you can no longer say the name of the person you love most. I've seen people lose their voice, but still tear up when they hear their grandchild's name. I've seen hands tremble, trying to write a spouse's name even when the words no longer come. They understand everything. But the words, just won't come out. And all of that could have been prevented. With just one checkup, one phone call, one small act of self-care just a few days earlier. You can keep your voice. You can protect your memory. You can live a clear, independent, joyful life. All it takes is this one belief: you are worth listening to. No one knows your body like you do. No one is with you every hour like your own body is. And no one bears the cost of ignoring the signs except you. If you've ever experienced even a small strange moment, please don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment below the video. I once slurred my speech. I once felt tingling in my hand. Because maybe, your story will be the reason someone else stops and gets checked. Share this video with an older loved one in your life. Not to scare them, but to say, I want to hear your voice for many more years. I want to keep talking to you. And if you're sitting there quietly now, wondering, hesitating, asking yourself if you should take action, then I only ask one thing: do it for you. Because you deserve to live with a voice that's still clear. A memory that still holds. A life where you are still yourself in every word, in every thought. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. I hope this video isn't just something you watch. I hope it's where you begin. Begin listening to your brain, starting with the smallest signals.